kind of ironic that I left snow to come to Austin and freeze in these rooms. So you'll forgive me, I'm gonna carry my tea. You might see me shaking a little bit. I think I'm getting sick, so I'll go back and hopefully kill this cold in the sun this weekend before I have to actually go back and hit the snow. For yesterday, I had a great time. I thought there was a lot of relevant presentations. In the afternoon when Effie was talking about this whole idea of, how do we start to move from really managing learning to creating context and starting to think about empowering our team members to take control. That's what I want to talk about today, sort of our journey at ATB and how we've been making that happen, and our ability as a learning function to really start to think about how we enable our organizations to keep up with the pace of change. So I talk a lot about future-proofing. How do we future-proof our organization? And more recently, as Cindy was saying, I took on change management. And that was really because our organization saw learning moving us forward in ways that was helping us think about the future. We were innovating. People were really digging into what that looked like and how they were going to grow their skills. And so the two naturally sort of married for us in that context. So I'll be sharing a little bit about what that looks like here with you. But before I do, let me tell you a little bit about who we are. So ATB Financial is a regional bank in Alberta, Canada. We are the only one of our kind in Canada. We have about 5,500 team members that work in 300 branches across the province. And we are a purpose-driven organization. So those 95 words on the Alberta, the province there, are really about who we are. And we believe at our core that we can fundamentally create happiness with banking. And we're very people-focused. So how do we create a great people experience for our customers, but also for our team members? And that comes out loud and clear in our 92% engagement score and being listed as Canada's #2 best place to work. So the entire country votes, and although we're a regional bank, we won #2. So we're very, very proud of that. And it's important because learning has a lot to do in that. I mean, I think we've all seen the statistics around millennials certainly are looking for organizations that help them develop. They're looking for opportunities for themselves to grow. And so as a function, again, we significantly impact the engagement of our team members as well as the strategy of the organization for how they're going to continue to grow that talent. About 3 years ago, we started discussing more and more this exponential curve in technology. The banking industry is being disrupted, fintechs were popping up all over the place, and we really knew as an organization that we were going to have to start thinking about how we work differently. How are we going to get our teams to collaborate? How are we going to get to innovate and start thinking about accessing all the great ideas from our people that are living on the edges, as they were talking about this morning, really starting to double down on those ideas and getting them engaged as a workforce to help us move forward. And so we decided to actually change out our whole suite of tools, Microsoft tools, to Google. So if you can imagine, as a workforce, we were on our email every day, on our calendars, we're a bank, so in Excel. And we decided to flip a switch and go from Microsoft to Google. And that was really to be used as a catalyst to reimagine the way that we work. So it wasn't just about the tools that we were using, it was about fundamentally shifting people's perceptions of the roles that they had in the organization and the work that they were doing by enabling them with different tools to do so. So I'm going to share a video with you to give you an example of sort of the excitement that we were trying to build there. Can you play the video? The excitement was palpable. We had an organization that was on fire, lit up, and excited about where we were going. And thinking about the learning strategy, I knew that it couldn't look like anything we'd ever done before. And so I decided to actually double down on the excitement that was being generated. So rather than using a learning team, I really went in for this whole peer-to-peer and how can I leverage the people within our organization that were excited about the new role that we were taking. We put a call out to the organization, and they had a week to come up with an audition, so a video, one-pager, whatever the case may be, that helped them articulate why they wanted to be part of this change. How would they want to get involved, and how do they think they could support their peers? As I said, we have about 5,500 team members, and in under a week, we had over 300 of them put up their hands to participate in this change. We chose 50 of them, and we called them our G evangelists. So these were going to be my learning people. These were going to be my champions across the organization that were going to help me think about how are we going to create this change in a way that made sense for their peers. At the same time as I was putting the G evangelists through a boot camp to really think about how are they going to empathize, how are they going to listen, how are we going to use those uniquely human skills to really problem solve the new change that was going through the organization. We also created an assessment. A really simple assessment of the G Suite tools that would tell us whether somebody was already using them. So are they using them at home? Are they using them in other workplaces? Have they used them at school? And are they proficient enough in them that we could use those technical skills when we did the flip? We created the assessment and again, put it out to the organization and said, you know, if you think that you're already technically savvy enough to pass this assessment, we will actually give you early access to the G Suite, because nobody was going to get it until the same day of the switch. We'll give you early access to the G Suite, and then you'll start to be able to think about how you can change your work ahead of the rest of the organization. And all we ask of you is for you to be our technical support team on the day of the launch, because you already have the skills. So again, we had hundreds of people go through the assessment, and 249 of them actually passed. And the beauty of this was we didn't have to do anything. All we did was assess them, and we knew that because of this accreditation, that they could actually be our technical support on that day. We identified them across the organization, and now they had access to the tools and were actually testing them for us in the different places where they worked. So they were doing their day-to-day jobs, but they all of a sudden felt like they had this amazing responsibility to start testing out in their localized areas how these tools were going to land for their peers and start to think about how they were going to support from a tech and capability standpoint. And finally, the G guides. So our business has many different lines, whether it's a corporate banking, investments and wealth to the branches, and of course our, corporate head office. And so with those unique lines of business, we knew the G evangelists would be doing things at an enterprise level in terms of messaging, in terms of learning, in terms of how we were going to ask people to change behavior. But we still needed like a localized flavor, right? Like there's unique challenges in each area of the business and how people work. They might be remote, or they might be, in a branch every day and not have access to audio, for example, on their computers. And so the G guides, again, were people that were in a localized area and wanted to help think about all of the information that was coming and make it palpable at the localized area. So again, they put up their hands. I now had this amazing team of people across the organization, none of whom were actually learning professionals or communication professionals, but all of whom put up their hands because they were excited about the change and wanted to help ATB move into the future using these new tools. And so I couldn't have ever put up a business case for almost 400 people to be part of my change management team or my learning team. And yet because it happened from a grassroots level, I was given the opportunity to do so. The G evangelists came up with ideas that we never would have imagined. They thought about, all of a sudden I had bankers creating self-help how-to videos and running their own YouTube channel. We had people go and do pop-up shops in different places of Alberta. And again, these are accountants and people that you wouldn't normally imagine would have these innovative, creative ideas. And we just sort of unleashed them and got out of their way. It was a huge success. We flipped the switch on a Monday. We were the first organization, Google said, to do that we didn't have a phased approach. People came in on a Monday morning and all of a sudden only had the G Suite available to them. And we had 300 calls come into our tech support, so those G whizzes, on the Monday, who were across, again, the province, sitting in their regular desks, doing their regular roles, but taking tech support calls. and by the Friday, we had 10. So in just 1 week, our organization had gone from full-on Microsoft to Google, and we didn't get one customer complaint. Our customers actually didn't even know it. It was a non-event. And in fact, the organization almost felt like it was a non-event. Within the next 2 quarters, we had 2,000 local processes change. So people started to reimagine the way they were working. They took things within their control, within their 4 boxes, and started to improve on processes. And we saved the equivalent of 24 full-time FTE by reducing costs. Again, all with the people in the organization focused on reimagining the way they worked. Because what we did is we gave them permission to think about what they were doing. So they were using GCal, and they were starting to think about, maybe I want to use my time differently. How do I want to schedule my days in a new way? We had also changed the learning environment at ATB. We had really democratized learning. We had put the power into the hands of our team members to think about not only what they wanted to learn or how they wanted to drive their success, but how they could enable their team members to do it. And so that's something that we've continued to leverage as we've moved forward. Fast forward to today. We are thinking a lot about the exponential curve in technology still, but we're also thinking about, what are the political, social, and environmental impacts that are happening, and these new informations that are constantly surrounding and bombarding our team members, and what does that look like? How are we going to continue to future-proof our organization and really use this great culture that we've created to help us springboard into the future? We have our team members who are constantly telling us that they're not sure about what's next. And either is ATB. We know that banking is going to fundamentally shift. We know that there's going to be things in our environment that will impact us. And our team members are telling us, I'm not sure what to do next. I'm not sure where to go with this. But what they do know is that they want to be part of where we're going as an organization. So in steps, learning. Susie mentioned my title is Connected Learning and Change. And so it's really up to my team to think about how do we connect team members to the skills that they need to master today, while they're also evolving and continuing to adapt for what will be relevant for tomorrow. And the real change here is that I don't feel like I own or control if people are learning at ATB. I really think that I'm here to help connect them to people, technology, resources, information, any experience that will help them start to think about how they can build their skills today as they continue to evolve for tomorrow. And so we've created a really unique culture in that it's very focused on the team member, but it's also very active. We have team members that believe they control their future. And so they're not sitting there passively receiving training. They are actively involved in thinking about what training would be relevant to them next, and how will that help ATB continue to evolve into the future. So I talk a lot about we are creating change makers, right? Like no matter how good your organization is at change, if your team members are sitting there waiting for change to happen to them, they might be really good at reacting to it, but after a while, you can't continue to react. You really have to be the one that's making the change. You have to be proactive and get in front of it. And that's been the real focus of our learning, our change, and even the culture that we're driving daily. We talk a lot about learning in the flow of work. So how do we really get team members thinking about learning's not a one-off event? Going to a class, taking a video, going to a conference, and then coming back and actually applying that in your everyday is incredibly difficult. We all have probably notebooks full of things that we've written down that were gems at different conferences. But when you go back and actually try to change your behavior, that's the most difficult thing to do. And so how do we start to enable our team members to think about learning in the flow of their everyday? How are they starting to improve on their skills, getting feedback on it? And how are leaders giving them opportunities to really practice those new skills and things so that it sticks and it's relevant for them in what they're doing now and today, and not trying to take something that was relevant in a class and then bring it and put it and make it relevant in their flow of work. We call this 85-10-5. So 85% of your time you should be working and getting better at the role you're doing and starting to use the tools and technology. 10% of your time, you should be mastering the tools and technology and actually becoming an expert in that role, because what we need is for you to be an expert in your role right now. And then 5% of the time thinking about what's going to be next and how's that role going to evolve and what will you need to do to help us evolve it as an organization. And so what that does is it actually gives people permission. It gives them permission to think about, 95% of your time, you should be becoming a master at what you're doing, and 5% of your time, you should be thinking about what's next. And the reason that was important for us was we were so focused on the future 3 years ago that, in fact, we had people that weren't doing their current roles very well. It was a real learning for us that we had created such an urgency in our organization that people were only thinking about what they were going to go to. They were only building the skills of the future. And in fact, we were beginning to have a widening gap and create stress fractures of what we needed people to be doing right now in banking. And so that's been a real learning for us, and where this came from. So this is our team member all in. This is our performance expectation of ATBers. So when you come in every day, this is how we expect you to show up. I want to call your attention to I make ATB stronger by. I think this is our secret sauce. This is the magic that really sets the expectation for people in terms of they should be constantly seeking out new information and sharing ideas. How do we get them to start, bringing the ideas on the edges for us so that the organization knows that there's something we should be aware of? How do you get people using the diversity of thought? When somebody brings an idea forward and somebody else makes a connection to it, that's when you get that sweet spot that you realize there's an opportunity for you. How are you mastering your tech and tools? So being digitally fluent is no longer the whole idea that people aren't tech savvy. That's not an option for us. You can't say that you've worked at the bank for 39 years and you're going to continue to do so on paper, because that is not the tools of our trade anymore. And so the expectation is that you master, if it's a laptop, if it's the SAP system, if it's your iPhone because you're on the road all the time, that you master that technology and you make it sing for you to enable you to deliver better customer obsession. You're asking for, receiving, and giving feedback. We talk a lot about engaged performance. So again, going back to this idea of we are active participants in our own performance. And asking for feedback from your peers, from your leaders, from everyone around you is a really important part of how you continue to grow yourself and grow your trade. And again, giving people permission to bring things up that they think are holding the team back. And that's actually evolved a bit from being very uniquely individually focused to being something that's really about the team. It's almost like the team is becoming its own persona in some of this, right? We've been talking about personas and creating journey maps for so long and unique personalization of learning experiences. And I think that the next iteration of that will really be about what's the persona of the team and how do we get people teaming and thinking about doing that really well together, and what's that going to mean for the experiences that we create for them. And then unlearning and teaching. So making clear this idea that if you're taking on all these new skills and abilities and things are growing in your mind, you're probably going to have to let some stuff go. What are you unlearning in order to make space for the new skills that you're bringing forward? And then if you're a real master at something, how are you teaching it to others? Anybody in this room that's ever tried to learn something, the best way to really become a master at that is to teach it to somebody else. Because the second you have to articulate it to someone else and make it mean something and translate it, it just sticks in a whole new way that makes you even better at it. And so we are really encouraging our team members to step into this idea of becoming a teacher in the organization. And this comes out in YouTube videos. We have SMEs that access and create videos on how-tos and different things in our systems, but even things like painting, leadership talks. We have people put up their hands for things that they're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be in their localized area. It can be anything that they think they're a master in. And we just give them the platform to do that. So as a learning team, what we're constantly thinking about is, this whole idea of ecosystems that was brought up yesterday. How do we create the ecosystem that really just helps remove friction for people? How do we set them up for success, that they are connecting their ideas, their thoughts, their passions, or they're pulling from other people, and we are just a connector in that. So we've become this real connector versus creator. The team is slowly starting to shrink. The budget is growing, and yet the amount of people that we need to do it is not. And that's really because we're leveraging the people in the organization to do the things that we in the past would have had to do ourselves, as well as using technology to help us move it forward. And so this is sort of where we're at. We're at this idea that, like, how do we create a system that enables people, that they feel like the system was created for them, that they go back to, if anybody was in the session here yesterday around user experience, how do you really start to empathize with where people are going and then create that experience? And again, not just for the individual, but the team. You know, we're trying to create a work marketplace where people can go in and just grab the work they need based on their capabilities. They can decouple themselves from roles, which offers so many more opportunities for us as an organization, but also for them as a team member. And so if we can give them the opportunity to grow their skills and then grab the work that they want to do to help really embed those skills, we're setting that an environment where they can continuously evolve and grow. And so we need to create the environment for them to do that. We need to use the tools and the data and the technology that tells us when there's new opportunities. So for example, you know, one of the great things that came with us with Degreed was just having the ability to go back to our head of IT and say, hey, did you know that half of your developers are all going and taking X language? And we actually don't build in that language, so what's our gap there? And what's the opportunity for us as an organization to start to think about why we would need to build in that language if our people are thinking it's something important for them to learn? So it's making connections not just for the individual, but also for the business based on what the individual is doing. Because we can actually see what they're doing, right? Like we ask them questions about what they're learning and they tell us something very different than what we see they're actually learning in the system every day. And so how do we, again, as a function, start to think about that from the business value that we can provide and the insight that that gives to our executives? My clock's not on, so I don't know how much time I have. It, like the rundown clock never went. On your tables, I brought something that we think about just at a very high level. So how do we create intentional experiences? How do we as a team start to think about, you know, people take certain steps when they want to make something happen. We've heard about the moments that matter. So we talk a lot about moments that matter for our customers. We flip the switch and then say, okay, so if we're trying to create this moment that matters for a customer, what's the moments that matter for that and the team member? And how are we going to start creating learning that will enable them in the flow of work to create that customer journey for us? This is a tool that we use to start thinking that through. Very high level, like what are the actions that people are going to have to take that we want to enable them in? Who are they going to have around them? Who are they going to be interacting with, and why will that matter for them? What are they really trying to accomplish? And this question, this idea of being able to articulate very clearly the problem that people need to solve is probably one of the most important strengths that I try to like drill into my learning team all the time. Because we have a real gap in understanding the problem that our business is trying to solve, that our team members are trying to solve. And so what happens is we build a bunch of learning that we think is the right thing, but it doesn't give us the lift that we're looking for. So the better that we can articulate that problem, the clearer it becomes, and the easier it is to tie performance metrics. So really great example being something as simple as in banking, we have what's called return without entry. So if somebody puts in a credit application and that comes back without actually getting fulfilled, it costs the bank a lot of money, it hurts our customer experience, and there's a whole downward effect of that. We can actually calculate the cost on that. And so if we're creating training that is saying how to actually fill out those credit applications, it better show that we are having a decrease in that return without entry. And that's the real problem that we're trying to solve for the organization. It's not that we need to have people that know to use that technology. It's that they understand the implications to the business and the customer if they don't do it properly. So what actions are they taking because of that? How do they make priority decisions based on that understanding? What systems and tools are they using? What do they need to know? What do they need to do? And again, at the bottom, this is the really interesting part. How do we remove friction from that? as the connector in that whole ecosystem in learning in the flow of work and getting our people better enabled to function in the organization today and tomorrow, how are we removing friction from them in this process? And so what I thought we'd do is give an example and work at it through our tables. So this is Ada. She's a customer service representative, a teller at ATB. She's been in her role for about a year, and she's really interested in working in marketing. So she's starting to think about what are the skills that I would need in order for me to work in marketing, and what experiences would I have. And so what I've given you on the table there is actually just a high level, this is how we'd start to fill this tool out. These are the questions that we'd ask. These are the things that we would do. And these are the steps that Ada would be taking in order to set herself up for success in figuring out whether marketing's the right place for her. And so I just want to give you 5 minutes as a group in your table groups. I've left the bottom row empty. So if you take a look at that and start to talk about the different steps that Ada would be taking and what that looks like, this is really starting to think about future state, right? Like, what's the experience that we would want to create for Ada in order for her to become somebody in the marketing team, for example, or for her to really discover if that's even really what she wants. I've filled out some of it for you, and I want you to just talk about how can we remove that friction. And you might be asking, like, why would you want to think about the future first? We always fill these out thinking about the experience that we want to create before we ever think about the current experience we have. And the reason that we do that is because we find it very difficult, if you're looking at your current experience, to break your thinking about how different that experience can be. If you create the experience that you want in the future, it's much easier to get your mind moving and being creative and like thinking of all the possibilities if you haven't like tied that to what is currently possible. So this is just a quick jot down of my ideas of what we would want Ada to be going for in the future. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes as a table group to think through what would be the friction that comes up for her and how would you help remove it as the learning function. So who would like to give us an example of something that they came up with? Some friction that you could remove? Can we get a microphone down here?
So we just focusing on that first column, talked about day in the life sort of blogs or vlogs that you could create across the organization. And then thinking about the tools that they have, that could be something that you integrate into a pathway, or you have something that allows colleagues across the organization to get some transparent line of sight into what an actual day looks like with a quick hit of information, so that she can get a better understanding of different areas of the bank, or in this case, marketing. That was one thing that we thought of for that first column.
That's a great example. I love using storytelling for that. Very nicely done, thank you. At the back there?
This works out well, because we were actually heavily focused on the second column with the leader discussion. And with the leader possibly not having the resources or connections, what we looked into to remove some of that friction is honestly to give Ada the permission to seek out those connections on her own. I think sometimes employees, if they're a little bit nervous about asking about moving into another role or another department, they get a little apprehensive about it. They're not sure how it's going to be received. So as a leader, to be able to say, you know what, I think that's a great idea. I think you'd be well suited for it. Reach out to marketing, reach out to L&D, like go and make those connections. And then the most important part of this is to follow up, right? As a leader, like, let's circle back on this in a week. What did you do? Where did you go? And if you find that, maybe they got a little nervous, and I speak from experience, maybe they chickened out and they didn't make that connection, well, then like, all right, so what are you nervous about? What do you think's getting in the way? Let's do this together. And making sure that employee knows that as much as you value them being on your team, you are thrilled to encourage them in their journey.
Great example. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to give us an example?
Hello. Oh, yeah, I forgot AV guys got to do their thing. We actually wound up discussing this from a different perspective, and I was fascinated by it, so I want to make sure there's the measurement of UX and using various models to figure out, so what is friction? Because we don't, I mean, how can we remove it if we don't know what it is? And the idea that there are frameworks and models out there to help us get to a place where we can not only understand it, but measure it, I think makes this whole experience something that I absolutely will be able to take back and use, despite the fact that it's a theoretical example. This template's wonderful, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So at ATB, how we help remove friction in an example like this is we actually have what are called experiential bursts. And if you are in any part of the organization and you find through Degreed somebody that has a skill that you're interested in, you can reach out to them, and we actually have a way for them to set up that they would go spend either a week, up to 3 months actually, that they will be in that area of our business and getting a really good feeling for if that's something that they want to pursue and it's what they're looking for, and they would have the skills and the aptitude to do that. So we've removed the friction by setting up an actual policy around this is something that we have available to people, because it's so important for people to get the opportunity to apply skills in order for them to really stick. So we've just created the opportunity. Any other questions about this? I'm going to go into questions about my whole presentation, but there is an example that I've left blank, and I believe with the slides they have the PDF template, so you'll get a PDF template of this too. Please feel free to use it, share it, make it what you will and what works for you. It's a very simple tool, but I think can be powerful to use with your teams to get them to start thinking differently about the opportunities that learning can provide. So, questions? Bueller.
Hi, I'm Vigila from Colgate. My voice is a bit hoarse. It probably took me about halfway through your presentation to understand what was going on here. It is so different from the way we think in our organization that I am sort of curious about. Was the culture always there to facilitate people moving across functional lines so easily, or is this a new development? Because for us to get someone to go to marketing, they would have to go back, get, MBA in marketing, work someplace for a long time, and then apply to come back to work in marketing for us. So it's just a different mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, it's not something that we've always had. It's something that we've definitely intentionally built in terms of the opportunities that we have within our organization. As we started talking more about the difficulty finding talent and how hard it will be for us as an organization to have the skills that we need to continue to evolve, and how important it will be to give our internal workforce those skills, it opened the opportunity for the conversation to be, and if we don't give them real practical ways that they can try or an incentive for them to go and do that, then they're going to leave us, because they're going to go and they're going to get their marketing degree and they're going to go to another organization when we could have somebody that loves ATB doing that right here. And so that's been definitely a slow development over the last 4 years, I would say. And we actually started it with our Know and Grows. And so how do we get our Know and Grows, who are probably going to be into executive within the next couple of years, an opportunity to experience another area of the business? And we had massive success in that first. And then we started to start the conversation of like, well, how can we really make this available to anyone at ATB? And it's not something like, don't think this is a crazy roller coaster, like we have people going all over the organization. Like there's still structure around it. They have to be very intentional about what they're trying to achieve. They have to be really clear on, what is the outcome and like the real path that they want to take after, and how they would be involved in that. So there's heavy lifting from the team members' part of setting this up and getting the organization, and we then get into it. So, yeah.
Hi. I really enjoyed and given the context of my organization, we're highly hierarchical, so I really enjoy your grassroots, growing from Because we always talk when we launch something, etc. It has to come from the leaders and everyone. So I am wondering, like, did you just tell the leaders, oh, here's all these people, and they just had to say yes, or where did you touch base with them to make it happen?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and wasn't easy, because when we went out for the G Evangelists, the first 50 that we used to help we actually told them they don't need permission from their leader. Yeah, you can imagine the angry phone calls I got about that. But I had the buy-in of the CEO and our chief people officer, and they wanted the organization to feel so different that they were willing to take a risk like that. I still get feedback on that, actually. I don't know that we'll ever do it to that degree again, because taking 50 people out for a 30-day secondment, it has a big ripple effect on the organization. It was absolutely the right thing to do for us, but you'd need some significant business casing to ever do it again.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, thanks very much for coming. I appreciate your time. I guess we have an extra long break because we still have 8 minutes, so if there is anything you want to come and ask me personally, I'll stick around. Thank you.